previous YouTube videos, I looked at some 2022 releases on the Anbernic Win600 with mixed results. Now there's been quite a lot of interesting new releases since I published that original video, so I thought it would actually be fun to make a return to the Win600 and check back in with the device, and see if there were any additional new releases that could be enjoyed on the Win despite being powered by an Athlon 3050E with Vega 3 integrated graphics. From lighter indie fare to some more heavy-hitting AAA games, there will be more to explore here than in my original video, and let's see just how far this device can be pushed, which is probably one of my favorite things to do with these handhelds. So join me, the Retro Tech Dad, as we explore the possibilities yet again on Anbernic's Win600 and check out more 2022 releases on PC. First up, and of course one of the easier new releases to run, shovelknightdig is a nice little spin-off game from the Shovel Knight series, and I first got hooked on this one over on Apple Arcade using a backbone controller. However, I have to say I think I'm enjoying it more on the Win600 with its excellent D-pad centric controls. It seems to be right at home here. The nice thing about this one is that you could probably turn down the TDP and get a little more battery life out of the Win600 if you wanted to. If you are a fan of Shovel Knight, this is a fun return to the world and introduces a very light, roguelike elements and procedurally generated levels. Regardless, this game has tight controls and satisfying platforming with an excellent soundtrack and killer 2D graphics. Next up is Tactics Ogre Reborn, and this game was actually just recently featured on my channel in my Logitech G Cloud PSP emulation video. Reborn is actually a remastering of the PSP game and features improved graphics and sound and some other quality of life features, making this one of the best ways to enjoy Tactics Ogre. I'm just glad that Square Enix revisited this one and exposes more people to the fantastic game that Tactics Ogre is, and it's always nice to have an official and native version that doesn't require emulation. I do wish they went a little bit further with the remastering and actually updated the sprite work, but I guess given how niche this game is, you take what you can get. If you've never tried this game before and are a fan of strategy RPGs, then definitely give this a shot. It's a perfect fit for the Win600, and it's another one that can probably run at a lower TDP.
A unit's level doesn't change when they change classes, so if one class isn't working out, a new line of work may be in order.
There's no reason to go making things harder on yourself than they already are.
Continuing on with some more classic series making a return, here comes Return to Monkey Island, which is actually a brand new installment in the Monkey Island series. The original creator, Ron Gilbert, returned to the series after nearly 30 years, and we end up getting a fantastic game that really captures the spirit of the original Monkey Island games, but updates it for the year 2022 with excellent gameplay mechanics, art style, voice acting, and of course an overall great point-and-click adventure. This is another game that is a perfect fit on the Win600 and runs at native resolution at 60 frames per second using the low rendering quality setting. On the 6-inch display of the Win, this looks fantastic and very vivid.
It's locked. Good thing I've got the key in my pocket.
Good, you unlocked it.
Wow, all I can say is 2022 has definitely seen a lot of remasters, and here we have Pac-Man World Re-Pac, which is another really well done update to a classic game. I loved Pac-Man World on the original PlayStation, and Re-Pac does a fantastic job updating the series for 2022. In fact, I'm hoping Bandai Namco continues on with this and gives us Pac-Man World 2. Anyways, I knew this would be a good choice over on the Win600 because of its very low minimum requirements, and to no surprise, I've got it running here at native resolution, 60 frames per second, on low settings, and with no post-processing. Fans of Pac-Man World and platformers in general will love this return to the series. Okay, now we should be moving on to truly new releases, and let's start off with the long-awaited sequel, No More Heroes 3. Grasshopper Manufacture's over-the-top hack-and-slash game is back and better than ever, assuming the role of Travis Touchdown yet again. I'm not even sure how to describe this one, but if you're a fan of the No More Heroes franchise, then expect more of the insanity that Grasshopper has delivered with this series in the past. I'm pretty pleased to see that this one's scaled down for the Win600 and is running here smoothly at native resolution with low settings at 30 frames per second. I was pretty optimistic given that this is also available for the Nintendo Switch, and generally I have had success scaling games down that have seen ports to that platform.
Gene, where are we?
In the core of the spacecraft.
So this is where the real hardcore bad guys are. What's that egg?
You know, like in that famous movie where a monster pops out of the egg and attacks.
Originally released for the PlayStation 4 and 5, this got a fairly recent PC release and is part of Sony's continued efforts to keep bringing more PlayStation ports to PC, which I definitely support. Sackboy: A Big Adventure is a spin-off of the Little Big Planet series, and as the title suggests, follows Sackboy in a pretty awesome 3D platforming game. Unfortunately, I don't think this one is all that popular despite being a very fun game. The game has the option to control frame rate limits, but for whatever reason doesn't allow a 30 frames per second setting. However, that was easily solved using Radeon Chill, and I set the 30 FPS limit using that. In addition, I set resolution scaling to 60%, but despite this, it still looks pretty decent on the 6-inch display. One last thing, I added a command to run the game in DirectX 11, which can be done by creating a shortcut, and then in properties adding an argument after the file location. Again, this was a pleasant surprise and a nice fit on the Win600. Okay, I know what you're thinking here. This is technically a 2021 PC release, so I guess I am cheating a little with this one. However, it did just recently get released onto the Steam store. But I did want to feature the game because it's well worth talking about, and if you haven't heard of or played it yet, then definitely check it out. This game came pretty close to staying at 30 frames per second using the dynamic resolution target setting. However, being an Unreal Engine game, you can actually modify a lot of the engine properties to lower or turn off certain features that may be more demanding. Now, I will include the .ini file, which I got from the Kenna Reddit, and turns this game into full-fledged potato mode. However, by using this ini file, the game has no issues running smoothly. The cool thing is that you can go back and edit some of the properties to adjust the way it looks and maybe make it look a little less potato-like. So at the end of the day, without an ini edit, I'd say this one is tolerable, but you're probably going to want to go beyond what the in-game settings provides for this one. I was looking at what games I could feature that released more recently in 2022, and evilwest definitely grabbed my attention. It is a third-person shooter and a nice throwback to a simpler time in games. This one comes to us from Flying Wild Hog, better known for games like Shadow Warrior, so you can get an idea of what to expect here. The game uses Unreal Engine 4, and I was hopeful that there would be plentiful scaling options for this one. Now shield your eyes, I do apologize for the rough-looking graphics, but this is what I had to do to get it as close as possible to 30 frames per second. And, you know, for science. Anyways, it's definitely much more tolerable on a smaller display, but for this one, I set the resolution scaling to 50% and every other setting to low. In addition, I went into the game config file and set the resolution to 540p. I am using AMD FSR 2.0 in-game with it set to the ultra quality setting to clean the visuals up as much as possible. Ultimately, this is probably not going to be the way you want to experience this game, but hey, it's still interesting to see it running here, and that's part of the fun sometimes. Now I might have a problem, and I will admit that I love Persona 5 Royal a little too much, so the reality is that I will feature it on the channel as much as possible. Anyways, out of all the games I will be featuring here today, Persona 5 Royal is probably my favorite and one that I'm glad to see running very well on the Win600. In fact, I was pleasantly surprised by how well it actually runs here. I have kept the game at its native 720p resolution, but opted to use the in-game scaling, and at 75% with low settings, it manages to run quite well, maintaining a fairly consistent 30 frames per second using the in-game cap. There are occasional dips in more populated areas such as outside the train station, and setting it to 60% helps with that. However, I don't mind the dips in frame rate and just leave it at 75%. The game looks good with the smaller screen despite the resolution scaling being lower. Now when it comes to Persona 5, this is one of my absolute favorite games, and it is finally available natively on PC, and also part of Xbox Game Pass. This is definitely one worth checking out regardless of where you play. Finally, making it to the last game on this list, and one that I've received requests for, and just so happens to be an incredibly popular free-to-play game that launched globally this year on PC and mobile platforms, is Tower of Fantasy. The good news is that this game scales really well, being based on Unreal Engine 4, and performs quite well here on the Win600. The game maintains a fairly consistent 30 frames per second using the in-game cap at 720p with low settings and no shading or anti-aliasing enabled. In fact, at this screen size, it looks fantastic and is really fun to play on the Win600 with controller support in combination with the touchscreen makes this a solid experience. So for those looking for a fun free-to-play experience and wanting to play something new on their Win600, look no further than Tower of Fantasy. And with that, we've reached the end. I really enjoyed revisiting 2022 releases on the Win600. A good number of new releases have come out since my last video was published on this topic. Now I will quickly mention that games like Spider-Man Remastered and Miles Morales and Uncharted were able to run, but I just couldn't quite get it to the 30 frames per second needed for a somewhat smooth experience. Those games were hovering in the low 20s and the frame rate was just too low to be playable. Now I am looking forward to testing AMD's Mendocino Athlon, which will hopefully get us to the 30 frames per second that we need. I really enjoyed making another video covering the Win600. I think that the device is fairly underrated, and with some pretty good holiday sales is finally finding better positioning on the price point and landing somewhere between a sub $200 retro handheld and something like the Steam Deck. Regardless, this is one for my early followers, and if you are new to the channel, the Win600 was the first device and topic that I started covering, so there's a lot of content available for it here. I definitely recommend checking out my other videos on Win600. It's been very fun exploring and pushing the limits of that Athlon 3050E. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, comment down below. This is the Retro Tech Dad, and thank you so much for watching.